phantom or specter, a menace or friend. Curious tales of the unnatural kind. Welcome to Eidolon. I imagine this sort of conversation will be met with some strong emotions from listeners depending how this information lands. Some might listen, some might deny, some might ignore, but I promise you it's all true. The very uncomfortable thing about crystals. Crystals are beautiful, and to some people incredibly meaningful in diverse ways and uses. The definition of a crystal in geological terms, straight from the Oxford Dictionary, is, quote, a piece of a homogeneous solid substance having a natural, geometrically regular form with symmetrically arranged plane faces, end quote. Within the context of modern occult and spiritual practices, the term crystal has extended to imply more than just the gemstones, and includes different rocks and mineral types from all over the planet, so long as they are in the context of spiritual use. The term has become a blanket name for the rocks that are associated with occult practice in any way. And so, crystals now sit on windowsills, on altars, in bras and pockets, under pillows, and grid arrangements, among so many other uses, and, of course, they sit in museums and collections. Some are so prized, so rare, and so beautiful they are one of a kind. In that case, they're likely in Washington, D.C.'s Smithsonian institution like the blood diamond. Most people are very unaware of the process by which crystals end up in stores. In many cases, even the people who love and use these stones within their own spiritual practice are only aware of the types of stores, which are the likely places to carry selections of different stones for sale, and that obviously they're mined from somewhere on Earth and brought to that store. There's no question of the profitability of crystals within American culture, inside and outside the spiritual community. However, the actual journey of an individual stone itself and the ripple effect of that journey goes unquestioned. Even with minimal knowledge or interaction with crystals, most people are aware of the clear quartz point that we find so often in so many aspects of popular spirituality. Running within the paranormal community exposes many more people to the use of crystals as well. The beliefs of some people involved in spirit communication go hand in hand with the use of stones, wearing, holding, healing, meditating with, setting out in a particular way, anointing, empowering, etc. Crystals are popular, and for the past several decades, they've maintained an astounding staying power in the cultural collective of Western spiritualism. So why is the process of mining and supplying these highly valued stones so mysterious to even the most informed of spiritual practitioners who've been using them for years? The level of unawareness that pervades many modern crystal owners is in part due to the lack of transparency in the sourcing of these rare, beautiful stones. With multiple steps between mining the rock and preparing it for purchase, the ability to track a particular piece's origin is murky and most often impossible. Bulk wholesalers are who provide much of the crystals we see in the shops around the U.S., which is no different from any other product for sale. However, there are many suppliers and many ways in which the stock of crystals can change hands before finally being displayed on the shelf of a local business. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying all this to guilt trip or shame anyone who loves and uses crystals. I own and use crystals. It's not the fault of the buyers or the businesses who sell these stones for being unaware. I was in the dark until I did some digging, spurred on by a conversation with several friends while in Salem a few years ago, and we wondered about the origin of so many rare, tumbled, and raw gemstones and how often these shops in such a popular town for spiritual practice and witchcraft would have to restock their crystal selections. Our wondering was not in vain. As it turns out, there are articles and studies done to bring light to what's really going on in what is called the crystal industry. What's the problem? Don't be nervous. It's not a mafia-level scandal or something, but it is a socio-economic, cultural, and humanitarian situation that, at this point, lacks abundantly in the way of immediate change, let alone understanding of it. Let's go back to the early 2000s when the term blood diamond entered our lexicon by way of a Hollywood movie. Not only was the Leonardo DiCaprio film of the same name a boost in understanding of the term blood diamond, but the national outrage it caused actually gave rise to positive changes in new laws and regulation in the diamond mining industry. It took awareness at a national level, even somewhat international level, to enact changes within an industry that sits at the upper echelon of financial power in our world. Crystals work the same way. They are mined from particular locations in the world where these veins of minerals can be found, most all of which are inherently some of the poorest nations on Earth. One particular country involved heavily in the crystal industry is Madagascar. Their red soil provides a protective layer over some of the most sought-after stones: amethyst, citrine, labradorite, carnelian, and tourmaline, just to name a few. These miners who dig these crystals out in their raw form are not working for employers who have an OSHA level of standards for operation. They're not given health insurance or safe working conditions, and the pay is abysmally low, especially for the incredibly dangerous and labor-intensive job they're doing. An astounding fact about the people who work in these mines is that, quote, more than 80% of crystals are mined artisanally, meaning by small groups and families without regulation who are paid rock-bottom prices, end quote. Many of the miners in these African nations happen to be children as young as 7 years old. There is just no regulation and no organization in place to control and watch the mining industry in these countries to be able to bring this type of work to a safe, reasonable, let alone environmentally sustainable standard. And this is the case in many areas of the world where crystals are mined, not just on the continent of Africa. At the start of the global supply chain of crystals are the mines in impoverished countries with workers facing dangerous conditions. But the side effects of mining impact the environment as well. The differing ways to mine, like open pit, alluvial, strip mining, mountain top removal, borehole digging, etc., cause irreversible damage to the surrounding environment, impacting a fragile ecosystem. Landslides are common within the mining areas, damaging the livable and farmable land of local communities. Surface and groundwater contamination from seepage causes a constant requirement of water treatment for surrounding human populations, and in many cases it results in compromised environments and destruction of resources for the wildlife. The glaring issue seems to be not just the side effects from mining, but the sheer silence and acceptance of malpractice by the various types of mines in operation. The earth doesn't separate her bounty neatly or in an organized fashion. Many times, mines operating for copper or other metals end up finding veins of crystals or gemstones and consider them byproducts. It gets murkier from there. According to Emily Atkin at the New Republic, quote, publicly traded mining companies don't routinely disclose all of their byproducts, nor to whom they sell these byproducts. Annual reports for shareholders tend to list only the cumulative profits from byproducts. It's therefore difficult to assess what percentage of the healing crystal market is sourced from industrial mining operations, end quote. What now? I don't think we need to run out and stop buying crystals altogether, because I think that's downright impossible at several decades into the popularity of healing crystals. But I think we could all benefit from more honest conversations with each other, fellow spiritual practitioners and crystal users, and friends who enjoy them, about where the pretty rocks we're buying are coming from. The diamond industry took a hard hit, and then a resounding rebound after receiving so much negative blowback and public outcry over the conditions of diamond mining. They implemented systems to track the product from start to finish in the supply chain. That's the most vital step in tracking not just the individual product, but the human and environmental effects the process causes before it ends up on the shelves in the US market. I think the crystal industry could undergo the same necessary, responsible changes if buyers are willing to find out where the stones are coming from. It's okay to ask a shop owner where the products come from, or at least what wholesaler or dealer they're working with. If you're stonewalled, you do have the option to buy elsewhere or not buy them at all. I can't imagine every retailer or seller of crystals is under some conspiracy of silence to never reveal their sources. I'd even hope most are open to the conversation of responsible sourcing and understanding more about the products they're working with. Capitalism is strong in the US, though. It's our whole game. So expect stonewalling when asking where minerals are mined, or employees simply not knowing. It's not necessarily their fault, nor are they the true villains. My best suggestion for going around the crystal industry altogether, if you choose to, is a somewhat obvious one. Dig the rocks you want yourself. A spade, a shovel, a pick, a bag. I know there are dwellers of large cities just rolling their eyes right now, and I get it. Not everyone can drive out on a country road to an easily accessible pathway or road cut and chip off the old block. If you can, though, why wouldn't you? I know there's particular stones with particular meanings and apparent properties, but at the risk of punishing the earth and the people who physically extract them, maybe it wouldn't hurt to take a look at the organic materials around your own region. There may be more types of stones and minerals available to be sourced on your own that could contain just the same aspects of the brightly polished, tumbled ones that you buy from a store. Ideally, a form of government oversight, not always a phrase full of bad vibes, would be the best way to keep track of the crystals that hit our markets from mine to palm. Like palm stones. I like crystals, and I don't necessarily like the government, but their regulation of diamonds has increased responsible sourcing and thus responsible and ethical treatment of people and the environment while still providing the product people desire. This is something that when it works, and the industry as a whole would benefit from regulation and ethical oversight of the operations of mining, selling, cutting, tumbling, and trading of crystals. The issue of crystals is environmentally damaging, inhumane, and ethically heartbreaking. If it's uncomfortable, that's okay. I don't think that's a feeling to run from as much as it is one to learn from and try to do better by. It's not a calling out. If anything, this is a calling in to those the crystal industry targets most. The paranormal and spiritual communities. We know who we are. Improving an incredibly impactful and profitable industry starts with the people who want and buy this product the most. Having an awareness of the issues at hand and what a regulated and transparent supply chain means for producing the stones we love so much. Just by asking questions and speaking with people on this topic, we could trigger the first steps in creating meaningful change in the responsible and ethical sourcing of crystals. At this point, a little elaboration might help. I do own crystals, and it's not just that I've been gifted them. That would be such a cop-out. I do have them because I've bought them. I'm part of a subscription service that includes them sometimes, and even where those are sent from, the proprietor of this subscription service knows where they're coming from as well, and understands this. I bought some crystals probably, I had a rock collection as a kid, but I guess I would say like 15 years ago or so, I was like, let's go out and find some sweet rocks and take them home. And I've always enjoyed them for what they are physically, and to give them further meaning and to utilize them in specific ways for whatever properties they may inherently have, and to utilize like that for myself through holding them or using them within different facets of my existence. It didn't really come into my life until, like 15 years ago at least, or something, somewhere around there, I think. I know that I went kind of heavy in it in such a way that I was like, I didn't really think about the rocks and the material so much as I thought about myself. I don't think I got out of these literal rocks and crystals what I expected. I don't think my expectations were met. So it's more of a understanding yourself, understanding where these things come from, finding things and sourcing things ethically, which I know can be difficult, but there are lots of places that do proclaim where their stones and crystals come from, and places I think are a little more forthcoming than I would have expected when I first recorded this podcast. So you're going to find more people willing to have this conversation, and I think you're going to find more people who understand it than I think I was really initially sad to admit, where's everybody on figuring out where all these things come from rather than just what they do. And that's what I'm trying to say with where I came from before, is what can these do for me rather than what are these for real? Where do they come from? How do they come to me? And do I feel like I can get more, maybe a more ethical use helps me to use them when I do, which is pretty rarely, honestly. Everything within my own particular purview, they become more specimen decoration than energetic source, honestly. So it's an understanding, like, where these items come from, and not shaming anyone for not understanding. I don't want to impart that on someone just because they didn't know this. I think, like, it's one of those situations where you're like, oh, the more you know, like, the more you know, the more you get a bigger picture of how these things are sourced, where in the world different ones come from. And I think depending how you're using them, and if you are using them in a spiritual manner, I think knowing the source only enhances your understanding of how you can utilize those pieces, those rocks, those gems and crystals for yourself. It's not to say everyone has to throw them out, like I said, but it's understandable when it's something that you need or you use or part of even like your livelihood, and there's not much of a way around. So it's really not something to be depressed about. It's more something to be proactive about. That's really all. This is episode 2 of Eidolon. Thank you for listening. This has been Amy of Amy and Ryan's Weird Adventures. This is still us. It's still me. Thanks for listening.